They love Xavier Worthy because he, breaks the record at 4.21 in the 40-yard dash. And then the film watchers are kind of caught in between all of them. The stat that kind of stood out to me, 39% of his 75 receptions came behind the line of scrimmage. I think there's a chance because of his speed and the way that he can kind of adjust his body control that he can be one of the true cheat codes. And now will require one of the fun offensive coordinators to get his hands hold of them.
There's so many numbers that matter in this. Let's take it in a few different directions. First, we'll just talk with the size, okay? 5'11", 165 pounds is what he showed up at the NFL Combine. As you said, did run a 4.2 140 at that 165-pound weight with a 1.49 10-yard split. As we talked about in our Xavier Legette video, there's a 56-pound difference between the two guys at the same position. But on top of that, Xavier Worthy, a 95th percentile vertical jump, a 92nd percentile broad jump. I will, disclaimer here, say that Tank Dell, because of what he did this past season, might be the comparison for everyone out there when they go and watch Xavier Worthy. And I get it. I will add, Tank Dell is kind of the exception and not the rule of what we have seen over the last decade or two when looking at wide receivers in the league. I think one main difference when it gets to this is that Tank Dell does play bigger to his size frequently, and Xavier Worthy can be a bit hit or miss. I have more to say on that, but I'll give you the floor before I do.
The other layer is that the NFL seems to be more creative now. And we just talked about this using these cheat motions where you were running basically at full speed at the time of the snap. They hit him in the slot on 40% of his snaps. 21% of his targets were in the screen game. You can get these bunch sets. So I think that there's this type of player used to kind of just be like, please win downfield and just use your speed, and you're kind of isolated out there. I think now there's just a better kind of utility for this type of player, even though I see some of the same weaknesses in the contested catches. I thought him working over the middle of the field, kind of alligator armed at some points, which totally understand. You're a 165-pound player out there. Totally get it. But I do think that there's just more of an appetite for this type of player now, back compared to the John Ross days where it's just oh, you're this fast? Well, good luck, buddy. You just got to run downfield.
I think Xavier Worthy has that same mentality that Tank Dell does of I want to play bigger, but at some point, 165 pounds just simply limits you. Again, with that said, to me, he doesn't shy away actually from a lot of middle field contact, but that doesn't mean he's great at it. He will make those tough, short slants, or there was even a 4th and 1 or a 4th and 3 where he was lining up behind a wide receiver and he was a dude they gave the football to try to get across the goal line. Granted, again, it was kept short. He doesn't shy away from contact when finishing off runs, especially when he's I'm sure you saw this too, tag or when on these crossing routes, throw behind him or even just to his back shoulder. Xavier Worthy does his best to make an attempt off his frame for these catches. But again, because his frame is so frail and he is this light, it's just so much easier for these cornerbacks to work either through him or around him and disrupt the catch point and disrupt his hands. And oftentimes that led to drops or incompletions, despite, I think, the urge to win physically. He just can't do it at times.
He had only 6 of his 23 deep targets be caught. I think some of that was Quinn Ewers just straight up missing him. Sometimes Quinn Ewers throwing him into that contested situation where he only caught 5 of his 21 contested opportunities, according to PFF. So yeah, it's a catch radius issue with Xavier Worthy. Now, the positives for him though, is I think that this guy can create separation downfield, not just with his speed. I thought for this type of player, and there's been a lot of misses with this type of player, I think that his tempo and ability to stop and start and kind of just keep these defenders on their toes, I thought that was really worth. Can get him on these post routes, corner routes, go routes, a curl route even against off coverage will be a nightmare with Xavier Worthy. But I think the bread and butter for him at the very worst, if you goes to the Shanahan, the McDaniels, those type of players, that
Rams,
those type of teams that use these guys side to side,
Packers.
I think Xavier Worthy is going to absolutely cook on those type of plays.
Yeah, and now that Jordan Rodriguez has termed it the shart motion based on what Mike McDaniel and Matt LaFleur and all these guys have been calling it, more and more teams, you're even seeing someone not from that tree like Ben Johnson utilize it. So guarantee you in 2024, we're going to see those short out motions far more often. And yeah, again, he has the willingness to play outside of his frame. I thought he was just so much more successful going up versus out with it,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. You also talked about his production profile. It's been incredible over the last 3 years. He had 123 targets in 2023 and 119 and 105. So over 103 straight seasons. He had 71 plays of 15 plus yards through 3 seasons of college football. And yeah, as you said, he had 32 targets behind the line of scrimmage this past season, but he also had 39 targets, 20 plus yards down the field. It really is a fascinating dilemma that you have here in a bit, because you don't see many players like this have tons of success as like a week in, week out, dependable type player that can be a bit of high variance. But I'm with you on like legit route running stuff. And I think we saw this against BYU and maybe some other teams this past season. One false step, and this can be early on in his route, he instantly creates 3 yards of separation. Instantly to play bigger. And I even wonder, like, if he does play closer, like maybe 10 pounds heavier, maybe he lost his weight, because, you know, is there really a difference between 175 and 165, especially when you're trying to break the combine record in the 40-yard dash?
The bit of winning the record combine it's a good bit. Yeah, it's a good bit, certainly. Now, going back to the production, he led Texas in receiving as a freshman, a sophomore, and then a junior. His like freshman season numbers were really good, whereas this junior season are not exceptional. 2.1 yards per route run is like pretty forgettable. Sub 10% first down rate per route run, that's below average. If you remove those screens, only his targets had a 51% success rate, less than 0.1 EPA per route, removing those screens as well.
Man, I think some of that's on his quarterback.
I really
do think it's on his quarterback, because there were so many plays where Quinn Ewers just didn't unleash enough, or whoever the backup was at times too. And he legit had to like walk 10 yards or sometimes work back to the football, when just a decently thrown pass would have equaled a 50, 60-yard touchdown.
Yeah, it goes back 23 deep targets, only caught 6 of them. If that's 9 or 10 of them, that you can throw on another 100, 150 yards to his profile. So I think that the numbers guys out there that love his early season or early career production, I'm more with that than compared to this like last season, because AD Mitchell's there. I don't really like the Texas offense. There was times where I thought that Xavier Worthy was taking plays off, which makes me kind of think that maybe it's like a Texas systemic issue where there's like half field reads and all that type of stuff. So it's not the cleanest profile for Xavier Worthy, but at the end of the day, we're talking about a superstar athlete, productive from day one, Texas type of player. I think he's got inside and outside versatility. And I think that with the NFL, they are ready to use this type of player. So a couple comps for you. Marquise Brown is somebody that has won on the outside in the NFL. There's some elements to his game. I think Marquise Brown's a little more physical than Worthy is.
Let's talk through some of these names, because here are the outside wide receivers at his weight: 55, Hollywood Brown 166, Deshaun Jackson 169, Devontae Smith 170, and Travis Benjamin 172. I mean, Devontae Smith plays the game differently than any of those other guys, intriguing to me, because again, when actually watching him and not just looking at he's fast and at this size, he plays the game quite similarly to how Tank Dell did it last year. Again, I just think he was less successful when corners would work through his frame than Tank Dell was as a rookie immediately in the NFL.
Well, you listed Marquise Brown's combine size, but just by watching the last couple of years, he looks a little bit thicker than like that listed weight. So I think we can kind of envision that with Xavier Worthy. A couple other names. Brandon Cooks is somewhat similar, and I think he was kind of used with some of this motion stuff recently. And then like the one that I actually really liked is T.Y. Hilton, because I thought T.Y. Hilton's body control down the field, I thought that's what I'm kind of seeing with Xavier Worthy. With these like corners on these deep post routes, when they're kind of on the back of their heels, it's kind of over. So that's kind of the player I'm picturing here. So I went early round 2 grade. I actually have him ranked ahead of AD Mitchell, despite the size difference, because I just think that his body control is going to be the difference making part versus the John Rosses and all these other names that kind of busted with this type of profile.
Yeah, I mean, you cannot give him a runway. Like, you can't, or else he's gone. If it's off coverage or press bail, and obviously when a corner is able to stick with him in his hip pocket, it does slow him down. He certainly does not play at 4.2 speed in that case. But want to keep bringing Tank Dell back into this, because I actually think that offense would be extremely successful with him. You know, we're talking about deep play action, basically 2-man routes where that Texans Bobby Slowick would use almost max protection at times. And so if your quarterback gets 3.5, 4 seconds to throw, Xavier Worthy is going to create some level of separation on 3.5, 4 seconds down the field, especially
Mm-hmm.
on these crossing routes. Because if it's man coverage with single high safety, because again, they're loading the box to stop the run, the guy's not going to be able to stick with him running across the field. So if he's implemented into that offense, he can definitely be a 2 wide receiver set outside guy in those environments. And I would be tuning in every single weekend to watch it.
I believe Les Snead, he was at his house watching the combine, and he turned to his wife and said that, oh, this guy that's about to run right now is the fastest wide receiver I've ever seen on tape. And then what do you know? There it is. So it does translate. Like, you can see the actual speed translate on his game film. Hopefully his NFL quarterback could actually throw him the ball on time into his breadbasket.
Question: as purely a downfield playmaker, do you think he's better than like Jameson Williams at that specific role?
So I regrettably had Jameson ranked like a tier above, but what I'm kind of learning now is Jameson Williams just didn't have like the schemed up touches and stuff that provide some baseline of a floor like someone like Xavier Worthy has. So I think that Xavier Worthy will be a better pro than Jameson Williams. Jameson Williams also, though, has a little bit more kind of catch point to his game. It's still not the greatest, but he's just a little bit taller than Xavier Worthy. But I like Xavier Worthy's just ability to kind of win in other ways, where Jameson Williams was like only a deep threat. Xavier Worthy can be that, but he also could be some other things for an offense.
Love that. Okay, this class is amazing. You need to check out all of our wide receiver profiles because of it. Because again, every single wide receiver in this group feels different in some way, and each one has calling cards that can make them potentially special in the NFL. So go click that subscribe button, hit the thumbs up, watch all of our videos on the channel. We'll check out the next one.